morning and welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. That scintillating talk show host with high Nielsen ratings, at least the ratings in here in Logan County. All two of your listeners out there, turn up your volume so you can hear our guest this morning. By the way, we always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. I had a real serious kudo here. Last night I went down again to welcome another honor flight home to Capitol Airport in Springfield. I mentioned that because Jesse White told me I couldn't drive anymore. So Joyce and Aaron Leisman take the old fella down. And I mention this specifically because Joyce and Aaron have been involved, very heavily involved in the honor flight down through the years. Mrs. Leisman orders online. She gets a whole bunch of little flags and folding fans and so forth at the Americana. And she and Aaron go down there, and one takes one door and the other takes the other door at the Capitol Airport entrance, set up a little desk there and a little decorated basket or bucket or something. And they dispense these flags to people who want to drop a couple of bucks in the bucket. And they raised an amazing amount of money. Last night it was almost $500. Free will offerings. People come in and drop a couple of bucks or a buck, and somebody will drop $15 or $20. I sat there and watched them. A lot of $20 bills dropped in there. Pick up a little 2-cent flag so that they can welcome the veterans home. It's a real night. By the way, if you have some time, I think the last Tuesday in September is the next flight. And it's a great experience to see these old duffers come off that airplane. Most of them are tired as can be because they've had a long day seeing the sights out there in Washington, D.C., and halfway they don't see many politicians, so their day's not ruined too much. But in any event, I just want to thank Joyce and Aaron Leisman for hauling the old man down there. And in particular for their efforts. That's very dedicated. And by the way, their son Adam is now in charge of the Springfield chapter of the Heritage in Flight TUI. And anyway, Adam Leisman's in charge of that, and there's a lot of responsibility in this honor flight thing. A lot of responsibility. Now, last night was kind of unusual. They only had one in my generation, one World War II veteran on the plane. Most of the plane, happily, was filled with, we finally got around to recognize the boys from Vietnam. A few Koreans, but most of the plane load, some 90 passengers, were Vietnam veterans, so it's appropriate that they finally get around getting their recognition. But it's a great thing that the Leismans do, and so I doff my hat to them. Mr. Kirby, would you like to introduce our guest this morning? He's a studious sort of a fellow, and he's made some notes, and by golly, we want to take advantage of these notes.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't prepare for the show, but it's nice that someone does. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
it works better that way. You have one out of the three is prepared.
Exactly. So you're talking about the honor flight, and sort of keeping with the theme of flight. Our guest today is going to talk to us about, I would say, one of the hidden gems in Logan County, something that's been around for a while, but maybe people don't know a lot about, but listening today they will find out. Curtis Fox is joining us, and he's going to tell us about the Heritage in Flight Museum that is at the Logan County Airport. So, Mr. Fox, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on. Heritage in Flight has been close to my heart for a long time. A lot of dedicated people who want to preserve the history of aviation, not just necessarily in the country, but in central Illinois. So thank you for the invitation.
You know, it's interesting to me, to the audience, having Curtis Fox. His father was a director of the what was called the Lincoln State School and College in those innocent days, where people was careful about what they said. Developmental Institute, and his father, Dr. W.W. Fox, was a very, very, very well-respected gentleman in our community, and so he and I became friends. And as it turns out, Dr. Fox and I were inducted into the largest class of new American Legion members in the spring of 1946, and they had that in honor of Dr. Bill Fox, and it was at the State School Gymnasium, and it was a huge class of new guys coming back from the war and all, and that's the largest class ever inducted in the American Legion. So Curtis had kind of a tenuous connection going back to those long ways, and I remember with fondness his mother was a registered nurse, and Mrs. Fox was a very well respected lady. Go right ahead, Loyd.
Well, you want to tell us a little bit about just the history of the museum and sort of how it came into being?
Yeah. So Heritage in Flight was originally formed in Springfield, and it was located at Capitol Airport. I think that was around 1980. So primarily they wanted to preserve aviation history, and they went so far as to buy a World War II bomber, a B-25, and with the intent to restore it to flying status. Got started on that project, and then at some point Heritage in Flight members decided that maybe Capitol Airport wasn't the perfect place for the organization, looked around for other locations, and came upon the Logan County Airport at sort of a propitious time. This was the mid-1980s, and the airport had been in existence since 1947, I believe. The administration building was itself a historic structure. It was part of the barracks from Camp Ellis, which was a gigantic U.S. Army training camp located west of Havana, Illinois. After the war, the base was shut down. They gave away some of the 2,000 buildings that existed on the base, and one of them found its way to the Logan County Airport as the original administration building. And at some point, also, some of the people who ran the airport lived in it. But in the mid-'80s, the Logan County Board decided to build a brand new administration building at the airport. Their intent was to tear down the old Camp Ellis barracks, and Heritage in Flight came upon this situation and said, "Oh, don't do that. This building has some history to it. How about letting us lease it from you and move the museum into the barracks building?" And that worked out. So in 1985, 86, Heritage in Flight made the move to the Logan County Airport, and the rest is history.
Very good. And so the museum was nosing around on the website and looking at the newsletter. In addition to actual aircraft, there are all sorts of things in the museum. I was noticing plaques and displays of, I saw there was a model airplane display that was donated, as well as some firearms. So what kinds of things would people see if they do visit the museum?
Well, the museum is full of unusual aviation memorabilia. We have items from the very early days of aviation, maybe prior to World War I, and we have current items. So walking into the museum, a person would see an aircraft engine that was built in Lincoln in the early 1930s.
Oh, wow.
And the name of the company was the Herman Motors Corporation. Mm-hmm. And John Herman, a resident of Lincoln, had the intent to build an aircraft engine factory in Lincoln. He built one prototype. We have that prototype in our museum.
That's amazing.
It did run, and he unfortunately was killed in an aircraft accident late in the 1930s. He was the company, so with any structure like that, once he was gone, the company folded. But we got a phone call one day, and a woman in Lincoln said, "Hey, I've got all of these parts and pieces of something that looks like an aircraft engine or an engine in my garage. Would you like to come over and take a look at it?" And we did, and here was this, the parts of this aircraft engine, and the paperwork, all of the paperwork to go with it. And so we just jumped on that. And Heritage in Flight has some extremely talented people, and they took these parts and put them together, and that engine is one of the main displays in the first room that you come to.
Oh, wow.
Here again, volunteers jumping in, but in this case, knowledgeable volunteers.
Yeah.
Something to people who knew what the heck they were doing. And, in these few seconds here, and I've been out to Heritage. As a matter of fact, my uniform's on stay out there. The malls haven't eaten it. But in any event, I've been there a few times, but I had no cognizance of all of the history of it. I never knew until this very minute when Mr. Fox told us it didn't start in Lincoln, Illinois. It started down there in Springfield.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an amazing thing to know.
Yeah.
And tell us about the visitor that we get out that museum, Curtis.
Well, one of the benefits of being at the Logan County Airport is that we are on Route 66, and we have had people from all over the world stop and visit our museum. The museum is listed in tourism brochures for Illinois, specifically Route 66. And so people see Aviation Museum and they think, this would be kind of cool to check it out. And they do. We've had people from Brazil, people from Europe, England, had a really interesting man from Australia stop in one day. And I always like to talk to the people. I can tell them about the museum, but I like to learn about their history. And he said he was stationed in Australia at one of the communications facilities that the United States set up in Australia to monitor the satellites, manned satellites going around the Earth. So that was his job, and I found that fascinating. We had a really fun experience. Jack Burke, one of the founders of Heritage in Flight, and I were hanging out one day, and this really fancy red Mustang convertible, shiny Mustang convertible, rolled up into the parking lot, and woman got out with a young man with her, and they said, "We're from England and we're doing the Route 66 tour." So mother and son were doing the tour of Route 66, and I just thought that was fascinating. And so they said, "Well, we saw Heritage in Flight listed on tourism places, and we thought we'd stop and see, since my son is very interested in aviation." And I said, "You've come to the right place." So they had a wonderful time, and then the son happened to mention that back in England he was taking flying lessons.
Really?
And she asked me, "Well, do you have an airplane here?" And I said, "Well, Heritage in Flight does own an airplane that our members can fly. And if your son wants to go for a ride, let's jump in and go for a ride." And so he said, I asked him a little bit about his experience, and he said, "Well, I'm almost to the point of soloing, flying by himself in an airplane." And so since I'm a flight instructor, I said, "Well, let's just take a lesson." And so he jumped in the pilot seat, and I got in the instructor's seat, and away we went. And he just had a wonderful time. I had a wonderful time. It was just a fantastic experience for me. I got to get their trip started off on a really positive note.
That's kind of an exciting thing to know, Curtis.
And so I typically, when we take a flight, we put the information in a logbook, but he didn't have his logbook with him. So I signed a piece of paper, told what we did, and told him when he got back to England just to staple it in his logbook, that the hour we flew was a legitimate addition to his flight experience.
Doing a little bit of history for me this morning. But by the way, speaking of history, without our sponsors, we would be history. So we will defer to our sponsors right now. Go ahead, Mr. Ash. Right back live in the studios here, WLCN. Program is Viewpoint, appearing each Wednesday morning at 8:15 to 0900 hours. Our guest this morning, Mr. Curtis Fox, who has already imparted a wealth of information to this old fellow who'd been around a while and thought he knew a lot about the Heritage In-Flight Museum. More specifically, Curtis, I'd like to just address the Logan County Airport for just a second. Of course, without the airport, we wouldn't have the In-Flight Museum. But am I correct in saying that, how do I phrase this? Well, just the importance of the airport to Logan County's economy. Is it true that we have a fair number of entrepreneurs and individuals who either charter or own their own plane who come into this community on business reasons?
That's absolutely true. Lincoln's newest business, the marijuana facility in Lincoln, has several aircraft that they use for business purposes that come into the Logan County Airport. And we do have a crew car available at the airport, so they jump out of their airplane, get in the crew car, and drive the 1 mile up the road to their facility. So they're using the airport for business purposes. I would mention that there are 3 businesses operating on the airport at the present time. So that's really important to the Lincoln economy. The state of Illinois Division of Aeronautics does a survey every few years of the economic impact of airports on their communities. I think it's every 10 years, but I'm not sure. And Lincoln's airport, the Logan County Airport, is included in that. And even though it looks like a small airport with not much going on, there is a lot under the surface going on. And the last time I saw this document, it said, if I'm not mistaken, that the Logan County Airport contributed at least $500,000 per year to the local economy, which is not insignificant.
No.
So there are business aircraft coming in. The people who own airplanes and have them stored at the airport create business. They buy fuel at the airport. They take advantage of the mechanics at the airport if their aircraft needs repairs. So there are things going on at the Logan County Airport.
Now, do we have to have a licensed A&E person to work on airplanes out there?
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't have to have one. We are very fortunate to have one at the airport. When the business at the Bloomington Airport shut down, Mark Piercy moved his business to Lincoln.
Really?
He thought its centralized location and very nice facilities would be a good place to locate his business.
Now, back to your Heritage In-Flight Board. You have a board of directors. Are they all Lincoln residents or Logan County residents?
No, actually.
That's interesting.
Some are from Lincoln, actually, 1 or 2. But Rick Kidd, the president of Heritage In-Flight, lives in Williamsville, I believe. Barry Miller is the vice president, and he lives over by Mount Pulaski. Art Williams, the longtime treasurer of Heritage In-Flight, with whom we could not get along, lives in Bloomington and commutes to Lincoln. In fact, when Heritage in Flight first started, he lived in Springfield and worked for Alice Chalmers down there. But he lives in Bloomington now and drives down on a regular basis. So
648-5510. We have our guest this morning, Mr. Curtis Fox, who's intimately involved with the little known or little thought of, I guess maybe that's a better way to prove. Would you think that would be correct, Mr. Fox? Little thought of by the average citizen going up and down Broadway. But Heritage in Flight is, in fact, a very viable organization out there.
I couldn't agree more with that statement. In fact, I have heard people who've gone through the museum for the first time say, I didn't know this was here. And some of them even said,
Go ahead.
I didn't even know that Lincoln had an airport, which is disheartening to say the least. But the museum itself is I hate to say this, but a hidden gem in Logan County, in Lincoln. We have so much to offer, and it's not just static items in the museum. The museum is intimately involved in Lincoln and contributes on a regular basis to lots of activities that go on in Lincoln.
Yeah, I noticed on your Facebook page that you had a table set up at the Third Fridays celebration back in the early summer. I saw where the organization had sponsored a group from West Lincoln Broadwell to go to the Challenger Education Center as well.
That program is close to my heart. The Challenger Learning Center at Heartland Community College in Normal is a fantastic learning experience for students. And so we, Heritage in Flight, invite any Logan County school to call and ask, and we will sponsor a class to go to the Challenger Learning Center. Heritage in Flight pays for the tuition for their entire class. So we've sponsored Chester East Lincoln, Lincoln Junior High, many times West Lincoln Broadwell. Barb Bowlby, a recently retired science instructor there, took advantage of our largesse. We sponsored them a lot of times. We're in discussions now with a science teacher at Northwest School. So I just think that's wonderful, and I make it a point to go with the classes to the Challenger Learning Center to see how they're doing, and it's just a wonderful experience. We also once a year sponsor a pilot seminar at the airport. We did our most recent one in June. The Federal Aviation Administration sends a representative to the airport to give a lecture on safety, on general things that the FAA are doing. This last time we had maybe 60 attendees. We had at least a dozen aircraft fly in from other places. Really well attended. We really enjoy doing that. Sort of interesting, I don't know how this got started, but at some point, West Lincoln Broadwell started bringing their entire school student body to Heritage in Flight for one day. We gave them tours of the museum. We let the kids fly our simulator, which is really a popular attraction. Kids get in it. Its controls are just like a real airplane. We turn it on. They move the controls around. The little simulator climbs and descends, turns. They're just really enthralled with that experience. Of course, we're in the Christmas parade every year. We do flight training. And just recently, starting last year, the Harley-Davidson dealer in Decatur started what's called a Warrior Ride, and it's a fundraiser for veterans groups in Central Illinois. And so for the last 2 years, their first stop after they leave Decatur is the Logan County Airport and Heritage in Flight. So we had 50 motorcycles this year.
Yeah, I saw that picture on Facebook. It looked like a fairly large-sized crowd.
Yeah,
So-
we were really tickled about that. The airport and the manager of the airport, Gene Rolfs, was kind enough to close one of the taxiways so that the motorcycles could come out onto the ramp and line up and be photographed. And it was a terrific event and a very worthwhile event, raising money for veterans groups in Central Illinois.
One other thing I noticed on your website that the organization does is you have the large spotlight that is available and actually available to be rented for events, if I understand correctly.
That's correct. So we have a World War II spotlight that was donated to us, and it works. We have some members, again, those volunteer members with specialized skills who keep it functioning. We've bought, since this type of spotlight isn't built anymore, we've bought up stores of materials from around the country from people who own similar spotlights who aren't going to use them anymore. So we have lots of spares. And this spotlight was used mainly in England during World War II to light up the skies at night so the gunners on the ground could see the German bombers. And the bombers were at 30,000 feet. So this spotlight shined up 6 miles into the sky. We can turn it on and light up a grain elevator that's 5 miles away from Lincoln. But we do rent it. It's a spectacular attraction. We have a crew that goes out with it when we rent it out. It has, it boggles my mind, 600 million candle power.
Wow.
So it's a serious light.
648-5510. Wake up out there, ladies and gentlemen. Our guest this morning, a cheerleader in charge, and certainly a storehouse of knowledge about a little recognized, or maybe perhaps even little known, feature we have here on the north side of Lincoln, Logan County Airport, and located on the airport is the Heritage In-Flight Museum, which had its genesis in Springfield, not Lincoln. But there's Mr. Curtis Fox was with us this morning, and he's willing to impart the vast storehouse of knowledge he has running around there between the left and the right ear. Curtis, I'm impressed by, I thought I've known you a long time, but I'm impressed by your enthusiasm. I always thought Curtis was kind of a low-key fellow, smart as a whip, but pretty low-key. I find out he's just genuinely enthused about his participation in the Heritage in Flight, Loyd.
Yeah, it's like we've been talking about, maybe something that folks don't know a whole lot about. As you mentioned, you're involved in the community with sponsoring the trips to the Heartland Community College Challenger Center and some other projects. Of course, those aren't for free, so I'm sure with the Heritage in Flight being a 501c3 not-for-profit, you welcome donations and contributions from folks who would like to sponsor. I saw you had some membership levels available on your website. If people would like to become a member of the museum, how would they do that?
Well, because it's an all-volunteer organization, the museum is accessible for tours by calling and making a reservation. So the phone number is 217-953-4118. We do have a website, also heritageinflight.org, and with some dashes between Heritage and Flight. But if you call the phone number, a very nice person will answer and set up an appointment for you to visit the museum with a docent to go around with you and show what we have. Now, that's access to the museum indoors. A person can go to the airport anytime, and see the outdoor displays, the static display aircraft that we've been able to get from the U.S. government. And some of them are pretty unique airplanes.
A way to contribute, Loyd, and listeners out there, could just become a member of the Heritage In-Flight Museum. They don't have an age limitation, so even an old duffer like myself could join. And I'm sitting here thinking, why haven't I been a member of that for all these years? So you're going to get a new member before you leave here today.
That would be wonderful.
I hope I don't have to pass a blood test.
No. And, membership is $30 a year, and we've had the same membership fee for 30 years, probably.
Well, most of our listeners would spill that much on a given weekend, so.
Yeah, I noticed you had individual memberships as well as students and family, as well as a lifetime membership. So lots of different levels and things to contribute. One thing I think we talked about it mostly during the break was the fact that you do have aircraft out there, and in addition to being the museum, you also offer flight instruction as well as, I believe, plane rental for folks.
That's right. So Heritage in Flight owns a Cessna 172. It is well maintained, a fun airplane to fly, a very easy airplane to fly. If a person already has a pilot's certificate, they can come out and take a checkout in the airplane, and they're free to rent it anytime. We do have several flight instructors at the airport. In fact, at the moment, the airplane is reserved every evening this week, I believe, and last week, by flight instructors who are taking primary students up for their initial flight instruction. So it's used. We do have a separate fee if you want to fly the airplane, because airplanes are expensive to maintain and fly, but it's not exorbitant. Other flying clubs, so to speak, charge much more.
Well, gasoline in and of itself is a major factor. Now, what would it, let's say somebody decided they wanted to become a pilot. Now, you're a certified flight instructor yourself, Mr. Fox. And what would it cost from start to finish to earn a pilot's license, approximately?
Well, that's a complex question.
Is it?
Depends on the person, but the FAA mandates that a person have a certain amount of flight time and ground time before they can become a pilot. So the minimum is 40 hours, but that's just unreasonable. Flying is so complex anymore that it takes many more hours. So, you're talking 5 figures, maybe $10,000 or $12,000, even at Heritage in Flight, where our costs are below average. So it's not inexpensive, but it is so much fun. You don't just get to learn mechanically how to maneuver an airplane. You get the wonderful experience of flying, of looking at the earth from an entirely different perspective than you would from the windows of your car or walking down the street. It's just an amazing experience. So I just can't I can't speak highly enough of it, of the experience. It certainly made a wonderful addition to my life.
Would it be possible, Loyd, do you suppose I could talk to Mr. Rash and get corporate to underwrite my expenses?
Maybe.
So I could talk about this on the air?
Yeah, maybe we'll get you a wireless mic. Maybe we could get like a big banner to fly behind the plane as you're up there. I don't know if Curtis will let you parachute out or not, but
well, we do
something.
have a skydiving club that has moved to the Logan County Airport.
We do have down in Logan County.
And if a person wants to jump in the airplane with our tandem instructor. We'll take you to 11,000 feet, and you can jump out with him attached to your back, of course,
Well, young friend
and have
Jim-
an experience that you'll talk about for the rest of your life.
Our young friend Jim Grimaldi is still doing that, dog, and
He has been.
why would anybody
jumped
want
out
to
of
leave
our
a perfectly good airplane?
Yeah.
But we have 648-5510. This is your chance to talk to Mr. Curtis Fox, who's kind enough to give us of his time this morning. I had to pry him away from the bar at Old Joe's this morning, but he's all right. Seriously, Curtis, we appreciate the number one, your willingness to come up and talk with us about something that's really important in our community, and something little known or little thought about. Heritage In-Flight Museum had a very, very important to our economic background here in Logan County. Logan County Airport. We find that there's a lot of activity out there. Something I didn't know that was available for a guy who's going to fly in from Galesburg, say, that you have a car that's available if he wants to run his errands and
Yes.
jump back in the car and fly back to Galesburg.
The airport does have a crew car available, and anybody flying in on a first-come, first-served basis, it's sitting out there in the parking lot. Very nice van, and a person can rent it, and all the airport asks is, put some gas in the tank when you get done with it.
Now, the airport is under our Logan County Board of Supervisors. Is that who is?
That's correct. There's the Logan County Board, and then within the Logan County Board, there's the Airport Committee. There are 5 or 6 members of the committee. In fact, the current manager of the Logan County Airport, Gene Rolfs, was a member of the county board and was chair of the Airport Committee for many, many years. And so when it was decided that the airport did need direction and an airport manager was needed, he was appointed to that position and is doing a wonderful, wonderful job. And people think, well, there's this little airport. What do you need to do besides mow the grass and plow the snow? Well, it's a complex, even a small airport like Logan County is a very complex organization to run. A person has to deal with the local politicians, the Illinois Division of Aeronautics, an engineering firm that handles all the design and construction at the airport, the Federal Aviation Administration, the U.S. Department of Transportation. All of these people are in the mix, even for a small airport like Lincoln. So an airport manager is absolutely necessary, and Gene's doing a wonderful job.
Point of fact is, we have a very important facility out there for the community.
That's exactly right. All airports, as I've said, even Logan County Airport contributes to the economic success of a community. People may not realize that, may not appreciate the Logan County Airport, but it is vital for any community to have an airport for economic development, but also for having fun. As I said, there are 3 businesses out there now, plus the Heritage In-Flight Museum, which is a wonderful, wonderful facility. There's so much there that is of historic value also, like the building that the Heritage In-Flight Museum is in, barracks from Camp Ellis, the rotating beacon, the beacon with the light on it that rotates at night, is a historic structure in itself. Really neat part of aviation history that was moved to the airport when the airport was opened. It lets pilots who are flying at night know the location of an airport. But before that, it was part of the 1920s and 30s lighted airway system that allowed airplanes, especially the U.S. mail, to fly at night. Whereas before that, there were no landmarks, there were no electronic navigation, no GPS. Can you imagine that? And so pilots really couldn't fly safely at night. But the lighted airway system was begun. When it was shut down, that beacon was moved, I believe, from a farmer's field in Atlanta, Illinois, to the airport in Lincoln, and it's been there ever since. So it in itself is a historic item at the airport. And of course, the Camp Ellis building, which is an entirely different story, a fascinating part of Central Illinois history.
Yeah, we had German prisoners of war at Camp Ellis, did we not?
That's exactly right. 2,000 to 3,000 at a time. It was located near Ipava, Illinois, which is west of Havana. I recently had the honor to travel to the former site of Camp Ellis with the Lincoln Women's Club. My special thanks go to the club's president, Terry McDowell, for inviting me to go with them. I was the only guy on the experience.
You liked the odds on that, didn't you?
So Ms. McDowell lives in Havana, knows the area where Camp Ellis was, and took us around. It was fascinating. Just Camp Ellis is another part of Central Illinois history that people don't know about. The Heritage in Flight Museum is, as you said, a hidden gem, but Camp Ellis, the history of that is fascinating also.
I was noticing on your website, as we were winding down here, the organization has monthly membership meetings the second Saturday of each month. Are those back now, post-COVID?
Yes.
Okay.
We meet at 10 a.m. on the second Saturday of every month, either in the museum or in the hangar. The public is always invited. Our meetings are open. And you can learn a lot about the organization and how it's run. And I can't stress enough the wonderful dedication of the volunteers at Heritage in Flight. We have some people who really are here I go again, dedicated to the existence of the organization, to the future of the organization. So my hats go off to them.
Our guest this morning on Viewpoint is Mr. Curtis Fox, local gentleman. Curtis, you were born here, were you not?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's deep-blooded in Logan County, with a great history of his parents of being significant contributors to the welfare of Logan County. Curtis, we appreciate your interest. We appreciate your giving of your time this morning.
Oh, thank you so
We
much.
salute you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for Viewpoint.